Hi, I'm Steve Schaefer, and today we're going to be looking at John chapter 4, the story of Jesus when he meets the woman at the well. Begin reading in verse 1. Now Jesus learned that the Pharisees had heard that he was gaining and baptizing more disciples than John, although in fact it was not Jesus who baptized, but his disciples. So he left Judea and went back once more to Galilee. Now he had to go through Samaria. So he came to a town in Samaria called Sychar. Near the plot of ground Jacob had given his son Joseph. Jacob's well was there, and Jesus, tired as he was from the journey, sat down by the well. It was about noon. Jesus is leaving Judea because of tension that the Pharisees are beginning to grumble and wonder about Jesus' ministry. So he takes the road from Jerusalem north. He's going to go to Galilee, but along the way he passes through the region of Samaria. Now, the road to Samaria raises many questions. First of all, it's symbolic of the fact that Jesus is leaving the central area of Judaism. He's leaving Jerusalem. He's leaving the center of power, the center of the place that are closest to the heart of Judaism, and he's going to the Samaritans. And the Samaritans were considered to be unclean people by the Jews. The history of the Samaritans is a little bit complicated, but basically they are considered to be unfaithful members of the ancient Jewish tribes. Back after Solomon, the Jewish tribes split into the northern tribes and the southern tribes. The northern tribes set up their own priesthood, their own places of worship, their own feasts, so that the people did not have to travel to Jerusalem to celebrate the feast in Jerusalem, which was in the south. And so because they set up these alternate religions, alternate places of worship, alternate priesthoods, they were considered to be apostate. They were not considered to be brothers and sisters of the Jews. And so the Samaritans were foreigners as far as the Jews were concerned. They are the lowest on the list of people that the Jews would have hoped for the coming of the Messiah. So as the Jews anticipated the coming of the Messiah and the joy associated with the dawning of the new age, the dawning of the fulfillment of the promises of God, the Samaritans would not be considered at the heart of God's activity. Nevertheless, that's where Jesus is going. And when he reaches there, he reaches a well. This is probably, the town mentioned as Sychar is probably Shechem. Shechem is in the valley between Mount Nebal and Mount Gerizim, and it is associated with Jacob and Joseph, although it is not specifically given to Jacob. It is given to Joseph's sons, Manasseh and Ephraim, when Joshua conquers the promised land in Joshua chapter 17 and chapter 21. So Jacob's well is there, and it is still there. It is well attested to. It is still a working well in the region, and it is a well that is carved out of stone and is probably about 100 feet deep, which means that it would require a rope and a bucket to get water out of it. So that's the well that Jesus comes to, and he sits on the edge. Continuing in verse 7. When a Samaritan woman came to draw water, Jesus said to her, "Will you give me a drink?" His disciples had gone into town to buy food. The Samaritan woman said to him, "You are a Jew, and I am a Samaritan woman. How can you ask me for a drink? For Jews do not associate with Samaritans." Well, Jesus is left alone by the disciples because they go into town to buy food. It's lunchtime around noon. Jesus stays by the well, and a woman comes to draw water from the well. Meeting a woman at the well breaks several of the social codes that were in existence then. One would be Jews don't talk to unknown women in public. And Jews don't associate with Samaritans because Samaritans were considered to be unclean people. And just associating with them was bad enough. But the thought of sharing a drinking vessel sharing water or table with one would be considered a more serious offense. But meeting a woman at a well also echoes several Old Testament kinds of scenes. Meeting women at wells was often a step in betrothal. Jacob met his wife at a well. Moses at a well as well. And it's also a prophetic place of meeting. Elijah meets a widow at a well. And so we have these Old Testament echoes behind this scene, but Jesus is alone with this woman, and he asks her a simple question: will you give me a drink? Jesus answered her in verse 10, if you knew the gift of God and who it is that asks you for a drink, you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water. Sir, the woman said, you have nothing to draw with, and the well is deep. Where can you get this living water? Are you greater than our father Jacob, and who gave us this well and drank from it himself, as did also his sons and his flocks and his herds? Jesus answered, everyone who drinks this water will be thirsty again. But those who drink the water I give them will never thirst. Indeed, the water I give them will become in them a spring of living water, welling up to eternal life. The woman said to him, Sir, give me this water so that I won't get thirsty and have to keep coming here to draw water. Well, here we have one of those classic scenes within John, where Jesus is using language that has two meanings. When he talks about living water and he talks about thirst, the woman is understanding him to be talking about literal water, water that flows, and therefore it's called living water, and literal thirst, what we all do when it's hot and it's noontime in the desert and you're thirsty. But what he's actually talking about is water that gives life. And so that dual meaning becomes the source of the misunderstanding, just like it was a misunderstanding with Nicodemus and born again, just like it's a story of misunderstanding about Jesus and the temple when he meant his body. So now we have a story of living water and of thirst that have dual meanings, and Jesus is using these ordinary physical encounters, the manipulation, the tangible meaning of water and wells and temples and birth, to talk about things that have a greater meaning, a deeper significance. So he talks about living water welling up to eternal life. That is the discussion that he's trying to have with the woman, but the woman is not quite on the same page yet. So he continues in verse 16. He told her, go, call your husband and come back. I have no husband, she replied. Jesus said to her, you are right when you say you have no husband. The fact is, you have had 5 husbands, and the man you have now is not your husband. What you have just said is quite true. Sir, the woman said, I can see that you are a prophet. Our ancestors worshipped on this mountain, but you Jews claim that the place you must worship is in Jerusalem. Woman, Jesus replied, believe me, a time is coming when you will worship the Father neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem. You Samaritans worship what you do not know. We worship what we do know, for salvation is from the Jews. Yet a time is coming, and has now come, when the true worshipers will worship the Father in the Spirit and in truth. For they are the kind of worshipers the Father seeks. God is Spirit, and his worshipers must worship in the Spirit and in truth. The woman said, I know that Messiah, called Christ, is coming, and when he comes, he will explain everything to us. Then Jesus declared, I, the one speaking to you, am he. Well, here Jesus establishes the fact that he is a prophet. He tells the woman about her history, and as a result, she recognizes him as somebody sent from God. He is a prophet. And so because she perceives him to be a prophet, she engages him with the most critical question between the Jews and the Samaritans. That is, what is the proper place of worship? Jesus answers and says two things of significance. The first is salvation comes from the Jews. Israel is God's chosen partner, the vehicle through whom the Messiah would come. But it is not just Israel that God is interested in as he sends salvation. He is interested in saving the world. And so although Israel is the vehicle through whom salvation will be communicated, the target or the object of salvation will be all of humanity. So Jesus is interested in this Samaritan woman because he's interested in Samaritans. He is interested in the message that Samaritans can also become sons and daughters of God, born of God, as he said in chapter 1. And he says, a time is coming and now has come when the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and in truth. Once again, Jesus is declaring that his ministry, his arrival, is proof that what was promised through Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the hoped for salvation and joy of the day of the Lord, has now come. This is what they've been waiting for. Jesus is announcing that kingdom. He says, I am. What we look forward to in the future is available to us in the present.